members of the public who may be either here in person, of which there are none at the moment, or on video. Is this being video recorded or not? Is this being broadcast, video? Okay, well, so people who may be joining in by video, this is a properly noticed work session of the Historic Preservation Commission. We are always happy to have members of the public here and listening, but as is the case with other work sessions, there will be no opportunity for them to speak. Only the members of the commission and staff will be able to speak. We have one major agenda item, which is the work that David has done on a couple other sections with regard to possible revisions to the historic district standards. I think copies were provided to all of you. I know at least one of you provided some comments back to David, as I did. I'm not sure, David, do you want to make any general comments or what have you, and then we'll call for any questions or other suggestions? I know I have one thought, but why don't you go ahead and lead off?
Oh, apparently. Oh, David,
Okay. Are there people who on further reading, including Maria yourself, who have comments or questions about any of the proposed changes that David has made?
I have the general comment as a grammar freak. Do we want to do Oxford commas? Because sometimes there are and sometimes there are not, and I don't know if people care about that. I care about it, and there's also some spacing stuff, but I can go over and edit those if you want before you.
I like consistency, and so I'd either like to use them or not use them, and I don't particularly care which. I'm personally modestly in favor of them because I think it enhances readability, but I will defer to the
I
consensus.
do like them, but if you want to just go through the document and make
Okay,
those
good.
changes and just send it, that's not something we have to
Perfect.
discuss here.
Yeah, and I also have to say my spelling stinks. Not only my grammar, but
It wasn't even grammar, it was punctuation, so it was totally fine.
well, Roxanne had at me too, so.
Richard, you look like you were prepared to comment. Turn your microphone on, please. Yeah. Are people then prepared? I think, do we need to make a formal motion at this time, or do we want to have one more scrub of these to tidy up any possible misspellings, Oxford commas, and so forth?
I know I have comments from you, John, which I've not incorporated, so we should probably review any comments anybody has before we,
Okay.
Roxanne has some too.
I had one overarching comment, and it was something that was in my mind anyway, but it was actually sharpened by a conversation that I will talk about a little later in a different agenda item with a woman who has served both in Pinehurst and in Aberdeen on their Historic Preservation Commission, and who indicated that they are actually much tougher on a number of things. For example, vinyl windows. They virtually will not approve people replacing wood windows with vinyl windows. And they have a whole set of documents and research and what have you as to why wood windows in the long run are actually better, blah, blah, blah. I think we as a commission, certainly in my 5.5 years, have been pragmatic and as opposed to dogmatic, and have approved a lot of things where we could have stood much stronger relative to what are in the standards. With that as background, there are a couple of places where we put where possible. Why do we have to put where possible? If someone comes to us, if we don't have that in there, and someone comes to us and says, but I'd like to do this anyway, that's why we exist, to make a determination as to whether we are going to grant that or not. And it seems like where possible lowers our standards and makes it harder for us to say no to something that we may feel is kind of at the margin. And again, my goal is not to make us be the Berlin Wall here, but in some sense we are the Berlin Wall in terms of preserving the standards that, among other things, were cited in the Parks District document. Woven all throughout their comments were the way that historic preservation has been done here. So I would just throw that out as a thought. not with respect to any specific place where it was written.
The reason I put that in there was to soften the blow for thinking I might have a battle on my hands. I would agree with you that fewer of use of that word, less using of that word is better.
Are you worried that future commissions who are not as pragmatic will take that literally and not be as,
Personally, I'm indifferent as to whether either this commission or future commissions take it as standard or not. Hypothetical, someone wants to replace something and there is no, it just doesn't exist. Well, they're going to come to us and they're going to say, I would have liked to do this, but I couldn't because it doesn't exist. Well, then we're going to have to look at it pragmatically and say, okay, how do we feel about that? If it is possible to replace existing features, existing materials with those materials, why do we want to lower the standard for that initially and make it easier for someone to come and say, well, I could have done this, but instead I decided to do that?
Agree.
I liked the wherever possible because it puts the burden of proof on the applicant to come in and say, I know I must do this, but I can't, and here's why. And then it allows us to determine. I don't think it makes.
The where possible gives the plaintiff, in this case, the ability to argue that it is a lower standard.
Yes.
And what I think is being said is they want the proof that it isn't possible, and therefore you can do it. I think your point is well taken.
and sometimes, because even when we get trees, when someone comes in and says, well, we had to take down the tree because it was, we don't know that. Like, I'm not an expert on tree damage or whatever, so I'm taking it at face value that this expert says that they tried. So I would be worried that someone would come in and say, well, we looked everywhere and we couldn't find that material, and this is like the next best thing. Like, I don't know. I don't have
a problem with that. If that's what someone represents and with
Right.
the expertise that we have on the commission, I think if someone said, I can't find that window, David is our internal expert on windows. I'm not saying his knowledge is 100% foolproof, but he's likely, well, wait a minute, Pella has that or Anderson has that or what have you. And on the other hand, if it doesn't exist, that's fine. Or if there's another rationale for why they don't want to do it, as we often see with people taking wood windows out and putting vinyl windows in, just as one example.
Or we have a case this evening or this afternoon where there's brick and they're adding an addition in terms of a garage and it's shake because they can't find the 1960s rolled brick. That wouldn't be possible.
Yeah. Well, I think this is just in keeping for the last couple of years where we've just tried to clean up this document and remove the subjectivity. And this is subjectivity. I know there's some subjectivity that we exercise here, but this is just making it shorter, sweeter, simpler, knowing the lanes that people need to play in. And their ultimate out is something can still get approved and be determined as congruous, even though it's not consistent with the standards. And that's fine. That's what we're here for. So they can plead their case here, say, I can't get the materials, even though I'm told I have to provide these, and we can still vote and give them their COA because they've played their case.
And
So-
conversely, in theory, someone could bring us something that was consistent with the standards that we found not congruous.
Exactly.
And we could in theory deny it.
So that's our ultimate, at the end, burden of proof is on them.
So you're saying to take it out?
I'm saying that's in keeping with everything we've tried to do over the last couple of years with these standards, which is remove those lines. So, and it's the same, you can go one step further. It says, be repaired rather than replaced. Well, basically what we're saying is, replacement is not an option, repair it. So, because, how many times in this document, we have looked at this thing for years, and then we've gone back and saying, those 2 or 3 words just, they don't even need to be there. It's just redundancy. We can clean it up, we can shorten it, we can make it simpler. So,
Yeah, I always think less is more, given that we can override, we can do anything we want to do in theory. We could approve something that was really not congruous, although I hope we would never do that, but.
Yeah.
And then
I think
the
to
corollary
further-
question is, if we were to take it out, do we still want to make it a must, or do we go back to a should? And I'm looking at character
Well,
defining.
I have a particular,
That's fine.
the reason I put in the where possible or when possible was because I was trying to move from the shoulds to the musts. If we were to remove the where possible and make it a should, we've lost a lot of strength in the rule.
But if you just do must without where possible, then.
Just a way to soften it, although if it were up to me, I would say must and leave the wherever possible out.
Because it also, well, if we do that and someone, we do approve something which is not, which is where they are replacing it, and we take the where possible out, that may simply be a condition of the motion for approval.
We have some general language where you say must, must not, you're getting into that. Maybe if you were to add in this general language something that, to the effect of impossibility, that would then leave some ability to interpret. Possibility is something that the commission can consider.
Well, we do have such language already, which is actually redlined in that first section on the second page. After the underlined paragraph at the bottom, which we added last go-round.
Where are you, David? I'm sorry.
I'm in A. the
Bottom of
Historic
page 1.
Preservation Commission, sort of the general rules. It
Bottom
stated
of
the
page 1.
Historic Preservation
On
Commission.
roofs or on?
The
I'm
other
sorry.
one. The other one.
You're on this
Yes.
Yeah,
page.
yeah.
I'm sorry, okay.
So at the bottom, last go-around, we added the stuff at the bottom that's underlined, starting the Historic Preservation Commission, that paragraph. The paragraph on the following page has been added and was proposed by the previous chair. So I think that those two paragraphs together do essentially what Carl was suggesting.
And as I recall,
I
when
see
we,
what you're saying.
when we debated the language of that second paragraph, the only one that is on page 2, the rationale behind it was that we would like them to incorporate that in the document so that we can be thinking about it in advance. But as a practical matter, if there's nothing there, they are going to be questioned by us in all probability, and they're going to have to explain it then. It becomes a little more ad hoc rather than setting it out in the application and allowing us to consider it up front, or allowing staff even to possibly say to them, well, that isn't really, you're going to have to explain this for this, that, and the other reason.
Can I just ask a general question, and this is because I'm new on this commission? This document is A, the Historic Preservation Commission. In my standards, this page is labeled as B. So my question is, are you eliminating A and renumbering everything?
When
That-
I drafted these, it
Yes.
was a long time ago. The
Okay.
standards may have changed since
On
then.
page 3 of the standards.
Yes, this is what is now called B.
Okay, so you're not changing that and eliminating. I thought that's what you were doing, so I was like, oh my God, we have to,
Oh, no,
okay.
no, it's just that this is pretty stale.
Okay, and my other question is, and it's probably because a lot of different eyes have made amendments to these standards over time, we refer to Historic Preservation Commission, parenthesis, HPC. And then we're never consistent in these standards. Once we go parenthesis HPC, we should always call ourselves HPC. But, we sometimes use Historic Preservation Commission, sometimes we use HPC. We're not consistent, and we should be.
I agree.
The problem is, though, for the public who uses the documents to, like the architects or whoever, they may not be familiar with what HPC is, and it's not in the glossary. So by using these mnemonic terms, you'd have to go back to the very beginning to find out what that is, and it makes it less user-friendly, but we should be consistent either way. We should either always say Historic Preservation Commission, or we should say Historic Preservation Commission, parenthesis, HPC, and then use that going forward. And
Well,
it's
okay, would
throughout
it-
this whole document. It's just not consistent.
Would it be reasonable to do that kind of I know it's probably going to rub some people the wrong way, but Could we do that like once at the beginning of each section?
That's what I thought.
No.
Just in case they're only going to section D, they'll have it there. We're only going to F.
And certainly we ought to add an entry in the glossary.
Glossary should have an HPC, but I understand why someone would say, if they're only going to turn to one page, why not just have a little redundancy? Redundancy isn't bad, it's got to be
Right.
consistent.
Exactly.
We need
Yes.
consistent redundancy.
Consistent redundancy, I like that, Carl. Okay.
When you say this constitutes impossibility, in that it is up to the applicant to prove impossibility in this language,
But it says it does not require that the applicant explain why it is not possible. It recommends it.
would it be in the best interest for them to know what we would consider as a means to obtain a waiver by saying such an example would be impossibility of performance?
Or would that be giving them an out?
Well, I don't know whether it's giving an amendment out, but what you're telling them is this is the standard which you can adhere to for an exception.
But you guys, wouldn't you tell, like, if they come to you to work through it, wouldn't you tell them, like, you can present this and the HPC will take the evidence and?
Take it under consideration.
Yes, I mean, I would explain that to them. I think if you took out like the where possible, character defining materials and features must be repaired rather than replaced. I think that's going to scare a lot of people.
Okay.
That they can't replace it at all.
And
So
they're
it
gonna-
would generate a lot of questions. Is there another option for me?
Can
that
you
we
just
would have
say
to
unless
explain?
approved by the HPC?
Well, they can't do anything that's not approved. so.
Yeah.
Well, let's, Maria, that's a good point. So I have an architectural feature on my house which is degrading. It's rotting, or what is wood, and it's, over the years, it's rotting due to exposure to weather. We don't want people not cleaning that up,
Right.
right? I don't know that, most people would not come before us solely because of a single feature. They're doing something else, and as part of that, because I would want them to still feel like they were being incentivized to make that repair just within the guidelines, and if it's a wooden something, replace it with wood. Don't replace it with vinyl, or, I mean, when we look at siding, we're pretty much not going to let people put vinyl siding on, I don't think. Yet we let them put vinyl windows in with regularity. So we're not pro or against vinyl. It's almost situationally dependent whether we approve it or whether we don't. Because obviously there's so many other alternatives to vinyl siding. You can use wood, you can use hardy plank, you can use, I don't think we like aluminum either, but that's
I
neither here
think,
nor
didn't the
there.
Well,
casino
and-
building do vinyl? So we have approved that, right?
I don't think so.
I thought they did.
I guess it would,
Thank you.
my position on being okay with the vinyl window is that you can't tell whether it's vinyl or white paint. Whereas vinyl siding, you can spot from some miles away, maybe, because of its trim, the way it's put together, the shape of it, I mean, it's obvious, whereas a vinyl window isn't necessarily obvious. To me, more important when it comes to windows, which I'll attack next, by the way, has a lot more to do with the proportions and the thicknesses of the pieces than it does the material they're made out of, whether it's clad in aluminum, whether it's painted wood, whether it's vinyl, whether it's fiberglass. Who cares if you can't tell what the material is? All appearance, everything we do is about appearance, not performance, as an example.
I mean, not to undercut my own proposal, but the other thought that I had in reading through this, in lieu of saying where possible, would be to turn this around and say that repair of character-defining materials and features is strongly encouraged. We don't say you can't replace it. We're just telling you that this is what we want you to do. And someone comes and says, well, that's great, you want me to do that, but I can't, or I don't want to, I want to replace it rather than repair it, whatever that is still going to come before us for consideration. I'm not, I like my first idea better, but I will throw that out just as another way to look at this.
Is that the same as should, though? Is that just,
Yeah, I feel
Phrasing it
that's
differently.
another way to say
Maybe.
should. And we actually set out the rules in what used to be A and is now B. We talk about the rules for the word should and should and must. And not only for consistency, but for clarity. I think we ought to stick to those words, should and must.
Maria's point about scaring people off, I don't know if you all have the same experience, but I've heard so many, and we'll see one soon, ask forgiveness, not permission. And I feel like if you put must in there, that's just what people default to, just because it's easier. And like, what are you going to do? Tell them to unpaint a house? Like,
But I think, David, you make a good point, because we are still saying that these are recommendations. This is not law. This is not something that no one can violate, but they're recommendations in the strongest terms when we say must. I'm sorry, Carl, go ahead.
I didn't have anything to say.
Yeah, and we go on to say that you don't have to say why it must be approved. We encourage you to, but you don't have to. You can leave it up to us and take your chances.
Okay, am I right that there is consensus to eliminate where possible here, in addition to other tidying up Oxford commas and what have you?
so we want to do must without the where possible?
I'd do that in a minute.
Are you talking, where are you?
Not throughout, but.
Throughout.
Broad
in this.
everything.
As a general rule, someone should make the exception case to the rule, but the rule would be we eliminate where possible.
Okay, does that, though, run into the Maria problem that, it's not a Maria problem, but you know what I'm saying? Where
That'll be
somebody.
my problem.
Yeah, where somebody sees that and says, okay, well, they're clearly not going to approve it.
I think that in further thinking about that, that might be the case if someone was doing something that I think might be considered minor work. If they're doing something that rises to the level of major work, this is not the critical issue. They're building a house, or they're making they're doing an addition. We'll take the case that we're going to see later today on an addition. I don't think they're going to not do the addition because they can't find the
Yeah.
brick. They're going to come to us and say, as I got a lecture from the owner, how the brick was special, you couldn't get it even if you wanted to. It literally isn't possible for them to put a brick on that garage extension, in my opinion, based on what I was told by the owner.
The other thing I could see that maybe affecting is that would elevate a lot more things that would, or could be staff approval, that they could substitute, they could replace something with an improved material, but if you're saying it must be repaired, then it would have to come before you.
Can I ask, this is kind of a different angle. In your experience, how many people actually read this before they start? Well, only because if nobody does, and they're like, I want to put the screen porch on and somebody told me I had to come to you, you would point it out. Like, that would be the first time they've seen it. And you would say, this says must, but I would take it to the commission. And
The more established builders kind of know. Now, if a homeowner comes before they've hired the builder, I think that's a great point.
I send it
think
to a lot of people to read because I know
Yeah.
that they haven't, not, especially homeowners, but even builders, they don't know. They still will send stuff to me to look over so I can make a judgment call on this is definitely minor, this is probably going to have to go before the commission.
so if we wrote this as more like a guideline for you to point to, it would be must then. It would be must, and then you could have the caveat that was, this is, you do have to, replace or repair or whatever instead of replace, but bring it to the commission.
You want that onus?
Yeah.
I don't think that's our duty, frankly.
Well, it
These
wouldn't
are-
be a
These are the standards.
responsibility.
What we're trying to do is develop a set of clear and simple standards.
Yeah.
These are the standards, please read them. If they
Right.
come back and say, hey, I can't get the brick, then you can say, well, you can make your presentation to the board.
Yeah.
It's not up to you to argue the case for them.
No. And it's not an onus thing, it's just if it tightens it for you, so that you can be like, this is the yes or no, bring it in front of the commission, and,
For some people, they might say, I'd rather save $375, pay $125 and make it minor, not pay $500 and make it major. I don't know.
But if it's something that they cannot repair.
yeah.
Then they have to
Then
make,
staff, I feel, staff doesn't have the ability to say, okay, you could replace it then with these approved materials, and it would still be staff approval. I feel like that's elevating a whole lot more stuff than really needs to be.
But the next sentence is a buffer, because it says if a material, it gives an example, is no longer available, then it must be replaced with a material. So we're pretty strong on the first line, so we're saying it must be repaired rather than replaced. And then if a material, an example, is no longer available, well, then here's your option. Then replace it with a similar approved material. We can delete the where possible.
We're still giving them sort of an out in that second sentence.
We answering, the next question they're going to ask is, what if I can't find the material? Oh, read the next line.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is what you do. And the whole, if you look at the heading, identify, retain, and preserve historic features. That's the goal. So in order for us to help them meet the goal, we don't want to give them too much leeway to not meet that goal. Identify and retain and preserve historic features. This is how we do it.
And even in that second sentence, I think we take out where possible.
Yep.
We're admitting that they can't get exactly the same thing. Okay, it's going to be, but make it look the same, if it's the same in texture and color, to your point, as you drive by it on the street, we're probably going to approve it.
Yep. I think the second sentence solves it for you and doesn't put too much work back on you.
Or us.
But I'm not going to speak for you. It does
No, I agree. Yeah.
Should I make a motion?
can we, I guess what I'd feel really good about, if we have the time, actually, is to go through all the red marks and get some kind of feedback from you all, one by one. So starting with A, which is now B.
That's terrific.
The first one looks pretty easy to me.
Yep. Must is obvious.
And then the last, very, very last paragraph from our alumni.
I have some grammar notes that I'll just give to you.
Thank you.
Just give us a quick tour of the grammar.
At the end, it is blah, 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 why the proposed design or improvement should be approved, probably semicolon, that is,
Right.
comma, why it, no period, is congruous with the special character. I think that period just slipped in.
Yeah, that's my mistake.
Yeah.
My only one.
Energetic.
Yeah.
The only other thing I would comment on is on the first page of this section, where it starts, the bullet points. That bullet point is a reiteration of your section from the roofs that you're redoing. So if you redo the language in roofs, it should be changed here to be consistent.
Are we still on A
Wait a
slash
minute.
B?
Oh, that's a good point, though. Here, it's this. So it's
Yeah.
this bullet point and this one. Any changes or additions to the configuration, blah, blah, blah. I think it is the same, though, right?
Roxanne, I
No,
think-
but I'm saying if he's making those changes
Yeah.
to the roof section, that is, it's
Oh, well,
repeated in here.
We also have, this is only existing houses, so we also have new houses. So the-
But you're saying adding wherever possible on one, which we'll probably take out. You would have to add wherever possible on the first bullet point.
I wouldn't do that.
Right, I think we're going to take it out.
Okay.
That's not what I was saying. I'm just saying if you change the language in one document and you repeat it in the other one, it should be consistent.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yep.
And why was the paragraph that's on page 2, why was that flagged? Did you make,
Our previous chair wrote that.
but were you proposing changes?
Nope. Was it
Oh,
in there before?
that has not been adopted yet he
think
wrote
not.
it, but it's not been adopted yet.
Right.
Got it.
That's new language.
And what is so the intent there is just to basically say, the burden is on you to plead your case.
Right.
And please put it in, please put the rationale in the application.
Yeah.
We can't require you to do that, but we would request that you do it.
Right. He's trying to get people to explain why they're not following the rules, but not requiring them to.
So Marie, would you consider an application complete if it did not include that, even though it was proposing something that, in fact, that might be the reason why it is major work, why we're seeing it at all?
Probably. I mean,
We've talked about some other things that we'd like to be sure are correct, you know, the owner appointing a builder, what have you, but if I was doing something that wasn't in the standards and I didn't explain why, you could still consider that application complete, and then the people will sit here and we'll try to figure out what we're going to do.
I would want them to explain to me why, so.
Good.
I guess just, all the points we've done is how to shorten this, so I like the idea of this, so I'm helping us, because you're the one who's saying, let's make it more succinct. So in the front, if an applicant for a COA seeks HPC approval, well, we know that someone who is doing a COA is seeking HPC approval. That's the whole process. So I think you can almost strike the first two lines and just saying, in the event that an application does not meet the historic standards, the burden rests with the applicant to plead their case, or, you know, or appropriately explain to commissioners, you know, why they're congruous. I'm not saying that's the language.
Trying to
but
shorten it.
I think you could basically say what you said in 1.5 lines. And you're good at that, at making it more succinct.
Richard, I think you're right. I think if we started with if, but struck out an applicant for certificate of appropriateness seeks HPC approval of. So we'll just read, if a proposed design or improvement that does not meet the standard, does not meet standards.
The burden rests on the applicant to plead their case appropriately, or, you know, just.
Well, I guess the point was, we encourage you but don't require you. I think that was
Yeah, he's
Eric's
just
original
saying,
thought.
Then you can just say that.
Yeah.
Then you're encouraged to appropriately plead your case for your best likelihood of receiving COA.
If a proposed design or improvement does not meet the standards, HPC requests but does not require.
Yep.
Yeah, got that.
Probably just why it should be approved. It's up to us to determine whether it's congruous. It's not up to the
Yes, you
applicant.
can delete the second half, that could be gone. But it's basically what we just started with. We're telling the applicant, plead your case, do a good job, explain to us. Exactly. So, however, I think you could have another look at that, David, if you,
Okay, I'll come back with a shorter version.
but it's a good idea, because really what we're doing is helping staff out there to say, it's the same, with the pictures we talked about a year or two ago, we said include, and that's improved so much, include pictures of other houses in the street. Don't just say you want to paint your brick, show us 10 other houses with painted brick. That makes it a lot easier for us to sit here and say you're congruous.
Right.
So it's just that. It's giving them the right tip to start their application off for the best chance of success.
Okay. And B, which is probably now C.
Yes.
Thank you.
One's happy.
So the first one, I think, is grammar.
Right.
Kara would have caught it if I hadn't.
what are we on now?
Where are you now?
Page 3,
Bruce, yeah.
are being replaced by is.
We're in this one?
Oh, okay.
And as I read through this again, the paragraph starting with based on the Secretary of Interior standards, by saying that they have to keep the following principles in mind, we are not telling them again that it is the law.
Right.
So I feel even more comfortable taking where possible out. We are steering them in that direction. We are giving them strong recommendation, but we are not saying that they have to do it.
Right.
Just they have to explain why they're not.
And those standards, if you haven't enjoyed staying up at night reading them, they're a lot tougher than ours. So. So we are encountering the first where possible. In the paragraph starting character defining materials.
This is just must be repaired rather than replaced.
Okay with striking that one?
Yep.
And then at the end, how about that one?
Yeah, same thing.
After color,
Striking again.
How about the next must? Under attempts must be made to stabilize.
I think that's a no-brainer. I mean, you should always,
It's a practical matter. We have no ability to enforce that
That's-
because it will have occurred before they come before us, but I don't have any problem with saying must.
yeah, really, the repairs, a lot of these things won't even come before us. We're almost helping them not come before us.
That's right.
We're saying repair it.
Basic maintenance
I mean,
is-
don't come before us.
Fix it.
We don't need to see you if you're going
Yeah.
to keep it
Fix it
exactly
before
how
you
is.
replace it.
You don't need to have approval.
yeah,
That's right.
fix your house.
But I think if they were to come before us and propose that they re-side a house
Yeah,
before they have tried to stabilize their existing siding, then we could say, well, did you try to stabilize your existing siding? And they say no, and then you say, okay, you don't get your, go try, come back. Okay, so, and the next paragraph, striking the line and replacing it with replacement of the historic fabric of a building and so forth.
Yeah,
What is
Because-
historic fabric? When you use that term, what does that mean?
cotton, things like that.
jacquard.
Fabric,
Tapestry.
fabric
Now,
is the
are you
clothing
talking
of the
the
house.
cladding?
Yes, it's the clothing of the house. Think of it that way.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many times fabric is used in the document.
The first time
Covering?
I've seen it.
Probably not very often.
Right.
Finding it.
And I know it was there, but that doesn't mean that it's right. It's what
Oh,
we've
but
seen.
maybe that's the Secretary of Interior's.
No,
Language.
it's probably common in my world. I can't say I made it up, but it's been around for a long time.
Is character a better substitute word?
Or covering.
Yeah, I would say covering.
It's not really character, it's the actual material. the
Cladding.
actual
Can you just say
stuff.
material?
You
Sorry?
could say material,
The historic material of a, is that, but it's the covering material, right? It's
all
not,
of the various materials that make up the clothing of the house.
but so the exterior. So
Yeah,
it's not
exterior.
like the concrete or the,
You
Whatever
could say
it's-
exterior covering, and then
Yeah.
you've covered it. No pun intended.
Covering would work,
Exterior elements of the building?
elements
but then that would
work.
be like trees and fences and stuff too. You know, like they could interpret that,
No, elements of the building.
right?
How could that be
But
a
that could even
tree?
be like
How
windows
about
and stuff.
elements? Replacement of the historic elements of a building,
I like that better.
better?
But are we specifically talking about like vinyl siding, wood,
Yes.
brick? So isn't
Anything
that
that touches the
different?
building.
But is,
But these, remember, the overall paragraph is component.
okay,
This
so
is
it's
not
any,
the overall house. This is a feature, a single part, a cornice, a corbel, or something like that,
okay.
I think. This is not the siding per se.
Oh, would it maybe
Although it would apply to that.
include the type of materials, design, dimensions, mass, scale, orientation, color,
I
like
think
all
it,
that?
I see it as the siding.
I'm sorry, I take that back. I think that's right.
Anything that's deteriorated, if you have a home that has old shingle siding, you want to replace it, you want to see if you can repair that before you go ahead and replace it with hardy board.
Right.
And if it's past the point of being able to be repaired, then it makes sense you would replace it.
If I just decided I don't like cedar shake and I want to put hardy board, that's going to be a major request anyway.
So what I'm asking about elements is, are we talking about windows too? Or is it literally just the covering?
How about replacement of all the historic elements of a building?
That would
The
include a
windows are
window.
part of the exterior anyway,
Okay.
so.
Okay,
So this section, if we want to understand what this section is covering, this section is really an explanation of the section 2 above, where it says, you know, the one where we delete the where possible? And we say, if something's no longer available, it must be replaced with material that is close to match original text, shape, and color where.
right.
So now what we've gone is we're saying, okay, in the event you're going down that road, we're going to put some caveats on that. This is the bucket it needs to fall into. Because that's what it is. It's replaced deteriorated component. But deteriorated component here really is the same as historic material that we've talked about two paragraphs above.
So do we have to say the where possible in that first line?
Well, no, but I guess I'm saying, if you, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the wordage, I think if we understand, what are we trying to achieve with this paragraph? We're putting more, we're better explaining the.
We're giving
second section
detail,
of
we're
that
giving
verb.
detail.
If you have to replace, these are the rules you got to replace by, and we're expanding that scale, we bring in other things, other elements into the picture. So it's not just, yeah, we're going to talk about fabric, but it's really materials, because that's the word we use too above. We said historic.
Let's stick with materials. I'm okay with that.
Right.
Okay, but then
Replacement
the
of the
Next
historic
sentence says
materials
type of
of a building.
materials.
I know.
I like materials, that's fine.
But then the next one, so do we just get rid of, type of materials, or is that, is that redundant?
I don't think so.
Okay.
So let me try this on you. I think following Richard's suggestion. Replacement of the historic materials of a building must use the same material and so forth.
See,
No?
You could use component again, too, if you wanted.
I guess, David, my point I was clumsily trying to make is, this is just a continuation of the sentence from above. So we need to read it, it needs to flow. It's almost like this needs to be, when it says maintain, stabilize,
Right.
protect, historic, that paragraph actually almost needs to come below this paragraph, and this paragraph needs to be in that place, because it's almost like it's just continuing the story.
Well, the
But it makes
first
sense as we
part,
read 'em.
the first part starts with maintain and stabilize. That's the first thing we want them to try to do. It comes first. If they fail at that, now they got to replace something.
Talking about the type of activity they wanted to undertake,
Yeah,
not the
in
type
order-
of material that's being involved.
Well, first, in order to get the paragraphs in the right order.
Agree with you, yeah.
But actually, I'd have a slightly different take on that. The first two paragraphs, identify, retain, and preserve historic features and materials. So not just features. I think we could eliminate the entire second paragraph heading, not the words, but just the heading. I think those two go together because we're really talking about the same thing. You find something on the house, whether it's a feature or a material, and we want you to use the same thing. A, we want you to repair it before it's completely broken if you can.
Preserve, repair.
Preserve it and repair it, don't replace it. But if you have to replace it, use the same material.
And this is the definitions for, these are the rules in which you can replace.
I think there's reference, and I'm
But,
not.
but if it's deteriorated beyond your ability to repair, then these are the rules that you have to follow.
I'm not sure of this, but I think the phrase maintain, stabilize, and protect comes out of the National Park Service technical standards. So it's sort of an obscure reference back to that, I think.
I don't care which we use. I think the two paragraph headings can only be one. We could use either one, or we could make it identify, maintain, stabilize. But the two paragraphs themselves, I think, are essentially fine and go together. They speak to the same topic, and the word that is kind of consistently woven through them is material.
So you're saying the first two, right? The identify and the maintain together?
Okay, so suppose, John, if I hear you right, we're striking the heading as an example. The second heading, maintain, stabilize, and protect, and merging those two under identify, retain, and
Yes.
preserve. Is that okay? Everybody okay with that?
So what we're saying is identify original features and try to maintain those, stabilize what you can. And then the next paragraph is, if you can and you have to replace it,
Right.
here's how.
I guess that there are a couple words in there that aren't covered, that are left uncovered in that way. Maybe that top heading can be expanded to include a couple of
word
words.
protect.
Right.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. I think it's
Preserve
probably-
and protect?
Identify, retain, preserve, and protect historic features and material. And then it's in alphabetical order, and I wouldn't want you to not have it in alphabetical order.
Thank you. It would have changed.
Roxanne like that, too.
In the process of that, you will be stabilizing and maintaining them anyway. I don't think that needs to be repeated, so.
It's okay.
Yeah, well,
I'll get over it.
Yeah, I know, but it's
Just to
more-
keep
it's
people's
more
minds
with-
focused, we theoretically have about 5 more minutes to try to wrap this up. I was hoping to cover some other things, but we can do that at the conclusion of the regular meeting.
I think we can get through roofs pretty quick. 'cause
Yes,
we've
I
been
think we're,
down
we're
that-
going to get there, but I just want to keep people's eyes on the clock as we do it.
Okay.
I would have one question for the resident grammarian.
Well, before we get past this, the third paragraph, replace deteriorated component, that paragraph.
Yep,
Any suggestions to the word fabric?
materials.
Even though materials is 15 times it.
It's okay.
Material.
I'm fine with some other word, but materials is what we seem to be using consistently through there, and if we have to repeat it, then
I liked components. That was
I'd
a-
like to, if we use materials, I'd like to add features or just features, which is really an assembly of different materials, like a window.
Replacement of the historic
Features.
exterior features. Do we have to say exterior?
well, at the top, we're saying preserve historic features and materials.
How
So
about
maybe we should say
features and
replace
materials?
deteriorated features and materials.
Replace the historic features and materials of a building. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, replace deteriorated features and.
I was looking at the heading, David.
Oh,
Replace deteriorate, now we've suddenly put the word component in there rather than features or materials. Does that solve your issue?
I put it in both places.
Okay, fine.
Features and materials in lieu of component and fabric.
To the resident grammarian in the next paragraph,
Yeah.
substitute materials can be used or may be used.
Substitute,
I think it's may.
I think
yeah,
it
it
should-
may.
I think it should be should,
I do too.
Should be, yeah,
stronger.
yeah, it is.
What?
Makes it seem like we have some authority.
Well,
You really want authority
if the
for
original
shall.
material is no longer available, they're going to have to use something else.
Well, but that's why it should and not must.
Yeah.
Well, you can use shall, which is the compromise between the two.
Do we use shall in the rest?
Shall and should are, by the rules, the same thing.
But it's match. It's must match. That's not
Right.
saying it's identical.
Right.
Oh, yeah. that's
Match
the
as
next
closely as
sentence.
possible, right.
Yeah.
This is also, this is again the bailout for the taking out as possible, because we're giving you an alternative if you actually can't do what we're asking you to do,
But we're keeping must match, right? Yeah. that's-
as closely
yeah.
as possible.
Yeah, we were just talking about can in the first
Got
sentence.
it, okay.
So are we striking the where possible?
Wait, which one?
Let me read that sentence. Replacement of the historic features and materials of a building must use the same material as the original construction, period.
You guys, don't kill me. Don't kill me. I know we only have 5 minutes. In the identify, retain, preserve, and protect historic, can you say components instead of features and materials? And then replace deteriorated components that are beyond repair, and then components is broken out into materials and features in the paragraphs.
Component
Why?
doesn't cut it as well as materials, as well as features and materials, because a
Just for the
component,
headings, though, just so that we don't have materials a million times throughout. Because you have character defining materials and features must be, which is fine,
I kind of like repeating the same phrase throughout.
over and over. Okay.
And I
Bor-
would-
boring
I would
as it
rather,
might
I
be.
would prefer elements to components if we were going to leave that in. If we're not going to make it materials.
Okay, so you have replacement of the historic features and materials of a building must use, see, and this is where it hurts my head, must use the same material, even though we just said materials and features.
Yeah, I really like fabric.
Is that like a word? I
Does
mean, if it's a
anybody
word-
know
Tick,
whether,
tick, tick here.
does anybody know whether these three headings, using these words, are lifted from,
Yeah, it's like necessary.
but is that terminology lifted from the Secretary of the Interior standards
Replacement
that's
of
referenced
historic.
above?
I don't know for sure.
I don't know, and I
Because
don't want to
if
be
it
glib,
is-
but I don't care.
Sounds like you volunteering to research that.
No.
Ooh,
Curious if
you
that's where
guys.
that language comes from.
What is a fabric in architecture? The fabric of a building is the general term to describe the external facade that provides protection from the environment as well as the main internal dividing walls.
Perfect.
It works,
That requires that someone, a layman reading this, understands that
but no
definition, which
laymen
is
are
an
going to read
excellent.
it. We've already
Put it
determined
in the
that.
glossary.
So
I don't mind fabric.
Do we
I
use
don't
it
mind fabric.
elsewhere? Do we use fabric?
I don't think we
I
do.
don't mind it, that just, I guess the original question to lead us down this rabbit hole was, does everyone know and understand what that means?
And now we do.
Not, does
But
everyone on
it-
this committee,
No, it's the public.
applicant? Yeah.
Probably not.
But they can do a little research.
We're going to obviously have one more reading of this, even if we don't do it in a work session. I'm going to exercise the rights of the chair to close the discussion of this particular point. I'm going to leave it to David to resolve, and we will have another bite at the apple before we actually approve it anyway.
we have to still do roofs.
And that's both to close this off so we can go through the last page on roofs very quickly and give him any other things that we have there, and so we can give y'all a chance to go to the bathroom if you need to, and IT a chance to set up here. So we need to be done in 2 minutes, which I think we should be able to do roofs in that time.
I had a lot of comments to roofs, but,
Yeah, I don't think we can do roofs in 2 minutes.
That's okay.
okay.
We'll do comments quickly.
So, John, just make sure I know where we're going for 2 minutes. Did we make any resolution on that one sentence?
Which one?
The last one that we just looked at, replacement of historic features and
I
materials?
think we're going back to fabric.
Yeah, fabric.
The debate seems to be around the repetition of the word materials. I think fabrics is an appropriate substitute. I give you proxy of the chair to figure out how you want to write it, because we're going to get a chance to see it again anyway.
Fabric it is.
Do you want to just finish this one, that it's done and dusted? And then instead of, then that way we don't have to come back and touch it again?
Yes.
And we can
I-
leave roofs for another time?
Yes.
When we come to
Roxanne, do you really have lots of comments on roofs? Fine. I will accept Richard's suggestion.
that line, substitute materials, we said, what do we do with can be used if the original material is no longer available?
Should.
Say that in the first sentence. I would just delete that whole sentence. It's redundant. We've already said,
Yeah, we did.
we already said.
It must be
if
replaced
it's no
with
longer available,
material.
replaced. We don't need to say it again. I would then just start that paragraph with substitute materials must match historic.
I like
materials.
that.
Yep.
Okay.
I like that.
Where are you? Oh,
He's-
okay.
The next to last paragraph, page 3,
Just taking out the first sentence of that.
deleting the first sentence.
No need for it.
Got it.
Does it add anything? No.
Your redundancy. I like it.
And the last paragraph? Must?
Yes.
Okay.
In view of other times, I think we're going to declare the work session ended. I thank you all for your thoughts and contributions. I think we've made good progress here. Roxanne, do you want to send comments to David? And you can circulate them to all of us if you
I
like.
already sent comments to David. And
Yeah, I
I
think-
think I might have copied you, John. This was a while ago, like 3 weeks
I
ago.
will check.
And John, you had some comments too. So I'd rather you guys present it to all of us than asking me to translate it for you.
I will be happy to pick that up. I'll find it. If I need to, I'll request that you resend it, but I will find it and I will.
Should
have
I
it.
resend my comments to everybody on the commission or I just sent them to David. I didn't know.
We can do another work session though, can't we? Can we
Yeah,
do one?
I think it
between-
deserves another work session,
Yeah, I think
frankly.
I think if we just have this one page, we may be able to handle that at the end of a regular meeting, as long as we've got it tidied up with all comments. So I will take them, I will attempt to assemble my best version with comments and recirculate that so people can be prepared. Work session is, do I need a motion to, may I have a motion to adjourn the work session? Moved by Carl Ecker. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Richard Vincent. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.